Good afternoon, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. So, the Federal Reserve has raised interest rates a quarter percentage point. That's not really a surprise. Anybody who has been following the economy, following the Federal Reserve, listening to their statements, and trying to understand their strategy would know that they are after the combating of inflation strategy. That is what they're going to do, and if they can raise interest rates in order to slow down the consumer spending, that's what they're going to do. And hopefully with that idea, they can bring down the inflation scenario that is running rampant through the economy. This is the whole idea coming from the Federal Reserve. Very confusing for people. They just don't understand what it is that's taking place out there. Is the Federal Reserve going to try and fight inflation, or are they going to try and support the banking system now that we have banking collapse taking place all over? It's really difficult. Like, I mean, I could totally understand how it is that people would be pulling their hair out trying to figure this stuff out. You know, really what it comes down to, this is cyclical, okay? This is a cyclical event that has taken place, and you have to understand how the flow of money works. And if you study like the Cantillon effect or read Cantillon's essay, you can really get a good idea of how it is that money flows through the system, and when it does go through the system, what ends up happening. And now, there is no reversing the issue, right? Once it needs to go through the natural course of things. And anytime I read an article where I see somebody say end homelessness, or an idea of fixing the economy to bring back manufacturing jobs to the United States or something, it's really it's not delusional thinking, because really, like, when you read some of the facts that they bring up and some of the logic that they bring to the table, it does make a lot of sense. Like, you can say, okay, yeah, I mean, I can really kind of relate to the things that you're saying here, and yeah, it would be true if that was the way things went. Like, you can really put a lot of this stuff into maybe your political thoughts, or maybe even just the economists that you listen to out there, and what it is that their suggestions as far as fixing the economy would be. I don't look at it that way. Like, I don't look at it as something that you can fix, right? It's something that's going to take place. And like, take, for example, the article I leave down in the description is showing that globalization is not reversing, right? A lot of people thought that things were going to start getting more localized. We were going to start manufacturing closer to the consumer, to the location of distribution. Everything about it was going to become more localized. This was the idea behind it all. Because of the supply chain breakdown, that's what started to ramp up, is the more localizing of things. But unfortunately, for that particular idea, it is far more efficient to have just-in-time delivery service, and that is really what's going to take over. As the distribution network starts to become more efficient again, starts to become more even, independent of people, like with the AI and autonomous things, this is really going to start taking over as far as the efficiency goes. And the one thing that I have found when it comes to distribution is that just-in-time delivery is far more efficient than storage and holding on to inventory and dealing with like bulking up of items. So when it comes to globalization and the distribution network again, it is going to be far, far more efficient to have just-in-time delivery than it is to start warehousing stuff. And with that idea, it is going to be cheaper to manufacture in other places around the world if it's cheaper to distribute to those places that would be willing to pay it. And this is really where inflation starts to get its real issue. Right? Because a lot of people just think money printer go burr, prices go up easy enough, but it doesn't quite work like that. In order for inflation, like price inflation, to really hit all items, the money has to be injected in all channels at the same time. That's why the last couple of years were so inflationary on all items, but you see like some items now are starting to fall away from the inflationary scenario. But it's because we had a stimulus package that distributed money throughout all classes. Everybody got a little shot at this. And so everybody got to spend their money like they normally would on all the things that they normally would spend, and then some, right? So everything got a chance to go and get purchased at the exact same time by the people who would normally purchase it because everybody got a boost of money at the exact same time. The only problem with it is that they had severed the supply chain, taken away all the inventory when that boost of money had come and started entering all channels at once. That's why you saw the inflation hit everything at the same time. Now, if you focused in on any one of these particular items at any given time, you would notice that it wasn't the same story for everybody, right? Not for all items. Now, yes, we experienced it all at the same time, and there was plenty of news and narrative and everybody else out there talking about it. But ultimately, if you just studied each and every single one of these individually, you could come up with reasons and excuses, and most of the time it came to a supply chain breakdown. Now, I saw it in lumber. I called it out very well in lumber, and I did a video pretty much every single week during the entire lead up to the pandemic and then during the run up into the all-time highs. And so there was no confusion on why lumber was running up to its all-time highs. And I've done just even a recent video talking about it that has, went viral with like over 400,000 views now. It's incredible. But, it's just the understanding of what it is that is taking place here. So when you think about what the Federal Reserve is really trying to do when it comes to the combating of inflation, what they are trying to do is raise the neutral interest rate, because that is really the major problem that the Federal Reserve had. And if you look at all the rest of the stuff that goes around it, you can see how it comes down to the manipulation of well, I wouldn't say necessarily the manipulation, but I guess that's the word to use. But it's the attempt to get that neutral interest rate to elevate, to go up, right? Because the neutral interest rate is the rate where the Fed funds is neither accommodating nor restricting the economy. And it was so low that the return on capital investment was then turning negative, meaning that the purchasing power of your capital would lose over time with investment, meaning that the return on investment plus the capital return of everything that you were doing out there when it comes to like a safer return was going into a negative, meaning that the return on purchasing power would not purchase as much in the future as you could get for it right now. That problem right there is deflationary, and that's why the Federal Reserve was constantly fighting a stream of deflationary pressures, right? The return on capital investment was too low. They have to raise that neutral interest rate. Once they get the neutral interest rate to be elevated or more elevated, then the return on capital investment can actually have a return back into the economy, and it wouldn't be constant stimulus that they would need in order to keep the economy rolling. I know this is really confusing, but really what it comes down to is that the Federal Reserve needed ammo, and they needed the economy to be able to work at its full potential. And in order to do that, they needed the interest rates elevated. Without those, they needed to go negative. And at this point, although they're going to do it now with the Fed now being introduced in July or the summer, they're going to be moving into digital, but until they can get cash out of the system, taking interest rates negative in order to stimulate the economy is not a very likely possibility. I mean, not in my opinion, just simply because everybody would start pulling their money out in cash, and then they would have an issue with trying to keep the economy stimulated. So it's not I don't think the negative interest rates would be available to the Fed until they can pull cash out. And in order to get cash out, they need to introduce a digital currency. So that digital currency is going to be introduced. They're going to have to get it distributed out there, get people used to it, getting, everybody like accustomed to it being a safe, currency to use, whatever that's supposed to mean. And then they can start moving down into negative. But until then, they need some ammo. They need the ammo back. And that's how they got their ammo, was by this whole mess that we have been experiencing, getting the Fed funds rate up to the 5% that would be normal for them to use to stimulate the economy, dropping that Fed funds rate around 5%. So they got their ammo back, right? They wanted it, they got it, they needed it, and here it is. It's just it's not surprising to me that they were able to do it. What is surprising to me is all the stuff that went happened in order to make it occur. Right? It was just either the Federal Reserve had the absolute best possible strategy to deal with every single situation that could ever possibly occur in order to save themselves, or they planned this. I mean, it's just there's no other way. Like, they cannot have possibly said, like 4 or 5 years ago, saying, man, you know, we got our Fed funds rate really low, the neutral interest rate is low, the return on capital investment is low, we got a demographics problem, we got a growth problem. What are we going to do about all this stuff? We really need like an average inflation rate. We need to raise our neutral interest rate up. We need to deal with a lot of the demographics problems that we have out there as far as their growing retirement community, and they're not much in spending. What are we going to do about all this stuff? And now look at the massive changes that we have, right? I mean, it's coming. Like, there is no fighting it. Like, I don't know anybody who says, like, I can fight this. I'm going to fight it with, you know, I'm going to be 100% gold and silver. Well, that's cool, you know, but you're taking on a position 100% gold and silver. Right? Or some people will be like 100% into cryptos. Or some people are just going to be 100% into their cash positions within the stock market or bond market, or even just straight up a cash position. And I have to think to myself, it was just like, are you willing to put all your efforts and everything that you got into one position like that? Like, we are going to go through a currency change here. It's going to be a sovereign and corporate debt crisis that is going to change the way we do everything out here. It's going to go into a tokenized effort. Everything's going to get tokenized. Our efforts, our services, our commodities, everything, right? It's all going to end up on a digital platform. Track, trace, tax, what all the scary stuff that goes with it. This is happening. I mean, you can just see the evidence of it every day taking place. And, you know, there's a lot of people who just ignore it, saying, oh, I'm not going to participate in that system. You don't have any choice. It's not a choice. It's not something you're going to be able to say, hey, I'm going to choose or choose not to. Like, it's going to take place. Now, you might be able to avoid it for some time, and most likely it's going to be slow. So, you know, you will be able to avoid it for some time. But at the end of the day, it's going to take place. And, you know, to fight it is really meaning that you have to understand the system, understand how it operates, know exactly what it is, and then try to figure out the ways that you can work around it. I mean, that's it. That's all there is to it. So anyway, wow. Uneducated economist, afternoon babbling. You guys let me know.